reminders as we get started, just to be mindful of your mic. Make sure you're muted when you don't want us to hear what you're saying or going on in the background, and make sure you unmute when you are ready for us to hear you. Remember to keep your video on as much as you can. We know that some of you have bandwidth issues, or there may be, lots of distractions in your background, and you're welcome to turn it off at that point. But we do ask that if you can, at minimum, please make sure that you turn it on when you are speaking. Just a reminder that this is a recorded session. We record these sessions and post them on our SharePoint so you guys can go back and view them whenever you need to. And just also as a reminder to take breaks as needed. If you need to step away, just let us know in the chat. Just give us a BRB so that we know that you stepped away. But otherwise, if you need to take care of something, feel free to do that. Also, just a reminder of how to navigate Teams. Most importantly are your camera and mic buttons and your chat features. So if you look, you'll see that your chat feature is the one that looks like the little bubble. You can push that and that should give you your chat options in addition to your camera and your mic. Pretty much the same across Zoom or Google, pretty much how all of that works. But if you have any issues, don't hesitate to let us know. Our team norms for the day: participate respectfully and welcome multiple viewpoints. Devote your attention to those speaking and sharing, or as I like to say, be there or be here. As always, if there is somewhere else that you need to be there, go do that thing. Otherwise, be here, be present. Ask questions for clarification. You are welcome to utilize the chat to ask any questions. As we go through our presentation, as our presenter has like a pause, or as I see a collection of questions, and I'll reach out to Jarrod and say, hey, Jarrod, here are some questions that we've had, and give him an opportunity to answer those. Be courageous and speak your truth, but also own your intentions on the back end of that. And most importantly, honor our time together. A few ways to stay connected. Remember that you can always get onto our Kentucky Leads SharePoint site where you can find everything Kentucky Leads. We have a directory with everyone's email on there. We also have the Kentucky Leads discussion board. We're going to talk about that a little bit more lately, but just as a reminder, that is a sort of an expectation, is to be participating and engaging on the discussion board. Jarrod was great and gave us some pre-reading materials for today's conversation. So if you haven't had an opportunity to see those, please make sure you hop on and check them out. And just in case you missed it, last month we talked about notable special education court decisions and other important authority. David Wickersham was here with us, and he was able to provide us with some really just good information and some thoughts. Again, if you weren't able to see that, or if you wanted to go back to it at any point, you can always go back to our SharePoint site to see that session. Here's a review of our agenda for the day. We're having our check-in. We'll have a few updates. Jarrod Slone is here to talk about physical restraint and seclusion. We'll have a quick 5-minute break about midway. We'll hop back into physical restraint and seclusion. We'll have some time for some small group discussions and some group sharing, and then we'll have our evaluation and wrap up. And Mike is going to lead us through some of our updates and reminders. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Shasta. Hey, a couple updates, everyone. As always, remember to please post in the discussion boards. That's helpful, one, to our project, but also with your outcomes to getting through the program. Next one is we're going to be doing the competency skills checklist for cohort 2. Been mentioning those for a couple months now. That'll be shared with you more directly in the next few weeks or so. We're starting to work on those now. More information will be coming about that. Last item is Kentucky Leads Summit, and we've been pushing out information about that. That is for June the 10th. That's a Saturday. It's going to be in Louisville, downtown Louisville, the Embassy Suites, where it was last year. It's not a perfect date. We know some people aren't going to be able to attend. Unfortunately, that's just part of scheduling an event with a number of people here. But we do encourage everyone to attend, those that are able to. It's packed with a lot of good speakers, a lot of good information that are going to help. That's going to help you in your future leadership role in the area of special education. With that, that's all I have, Ms. Shasta.
And I do just want to let everyone know, I know you guys have some colleagues and some peers who are interested in cohort 4. So the applications for cohort 4 will be opening up in April. So just keep an eye on our Kentucky Leads, the website portion of Kentucky Leads, not the SharePoint of Kentucky Leads, but we will also send out an email to everybody so that you guys can see that. But just go ahead and be putting the bug in people's ear about this opportunity of anyone who you think might be interested in entering into cohort 4. And all right, so we do have a quick project evaluation and update video, and this is from Rebecca Banner, right, friends? That's who it's from. It's Rebecca, right? I'm trying to remember all the people who do all of our evaluation stuff. So Rebecca has created a video for us just to kind of give you guys an update on the data that's been collected and the evaluation of this. We thought that might be helpful to you guys. So I'm going to try really quickly to get this to open. It worked yesterday. We'll see what happens today. Okay, now I've lost the screen. So can someone tell me, can you guys see the video?
No, we see the project evaluation update video slide. So you may want to stop sharing and then share again. That's the quickest fix for that.
That's what I figured I would have to do. But I know when I stop sharing, I'm going to lose this awesome present in Teams mode.
Oh,
No,
yes.
it's going to go away.
I know, I'm sure everyone's been scrolling through the slides.
Let's see here. Ugh, and now it's gone. Let me stop presenting again. Sorry, friends. Let me get our video open.
And remember to toggle that share sound.
Okay, now let me get back on to Teams. And I'm going to share, and I'm going to share with sound. All right, are you guys seeing the video now?
Yeah, thank you, Shasta.
Okay, let me see if you can hear it now.
Morning, my name is Rebecca
Perfect.
Banner. I work for the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute with the Evaluation Unit. I work on the evaluation of the Kentucky Leads project with Hannah Hyatt. We put together this short video to give a quick snapshot of the data we collect for this evaluation. Jumping right in, this first slide should be very familiar to all of the scholars, as it is a screenshot of the survey you all complete immediately following a Saturday seminar. This survey gives a sense of how the session went, as well as scholar reactions. The short survey is composed of a series of 8 broad questions that aim to capture things like relevance to future leadership plans and increased knowledge of, understanding of, and confidence to implement strategies covered in the session. The results of this survey are used to address these 2 performance measures taken from the Leads Grant's annual performance report. These performance measures are annually 70% of scholars report that the training was high quality, relevant, and useful via the Leads Academy survey. And annually, 70% of scholars report that their knowledge of evidence-based practices increased via the Leads Academy survey. Here we have a sample of data from the 4 most recent Saturday seminar surveys. In the far left column, you'll see the seminar date. The next column is the N size or number of surveys received. And down at the bottom, you can see the total number of scholars in both cohorts 2 and 3. In an ideal world, all 38 scholars would be in attendance and complete the survey. The statement column in the middle shows the highest rated statement in blue and the lowest rated statement or statements in white for each session. Just a reminder that this survey uses a 4-point scale of agreement, with a 1 representing strongly disagree and a 4 representing strongly agree. So all of these means here are actually in between the ratings of agree and strongly agree. There is usually not a huge difference in these means, so it is also helpful to look at the frequency of 1s and 2s, or people who selected disagree and strongly disagree. It's interesting to note that the same 2 statements received the highest ratings in these 4 months. These statements were, today's session was relevant to my future leadership plans, and both the content and the platform of today's session were accessible. Also, the same 3 statements received the lowest ratings. The statements about adult learning strategies, impact on coaching practices, and supporting educators who serve students with disabilities all appear at the bottom twice over the course of these 4 sessions. Now you'll notice with the November survey that there were 2 people who selected strongly disagree with both the highest and lowest rated statements. Sometimes we see this where an individual will mark strongly disagree for all 8 statements and leave no comments in the additional comments box. In these cases, there's no way for us to know if it was a missed bubble where they meant to mark strongly agree, or if someone really had an issue with the seminar. So here is your little plug to always double check that you've marked the right boxes, or to leave a quick comment that expresses your sentiments. Here's a look at a particular Saturday session's data. These are the responses from last month's survey. The response frequencies for each point of the rating scale for each statement are listed in the table. The goal of the survey is to help the initiative better meet current scholar needs and the needs of future cohorts. So these survey results are shared with project leadership, including curriculum committee members during planning meetings. Sometimes this information leads to changes in curriculum design, learning objectives, and training activities. A quick example of this comes from the additional comments section of the survey. Following a Saturday seminar, a scholar commented it was too much for one session. I would have liked for it to have been broken down or front-loaded something we could read before the discussion. Now, I will say that there is only so much control that the curriculum committee has over what is presented or whether or not they receive materials prior to the training. However, they took this comment and began sharing and uploading resources before the sessions when possible. This is evidenced by the comments we started seeing shortly after. I enjoyed reading the article before the session, and I really liked that Becca shared the agenda the day before, as well as links to quickly access and review content. So just keep in mind that your comments are read and taken into account in those planning meetings. I'm going to shift focus and quickly speak on another survey that you all have encountered at least once. This survey is officially called the Kentucky Leads Academy Participant Competency Survey. This is a comprehensive needs assessment constructed based on the project's comprehensive plan. All scholars take this assessment when they first start the Leads Academy, and the aim is to set a baseline level of scholars' understanding and skills. This informs the curriculum committee and trainers about priority areas in which to focus activities. The survey is also used at the end of year 1 as a formative program assessment and also at the end of year 2 as a summative program assessment. So cohort 3 completed their baseline survey in August of last year, and cohort 2 has just recently completed their year 1 follow-up survey. Unlike the Saturday seminar surveys, this survey has your name on it. And while your individual answers remain anonymous, we do have to make sure that you complete it, and we'll have to keep pestering you with reminders until we have them all. This survey is composed of a series of 31 statements that aim to capture scholars' current knowledge and implementation of the Academy's conceptual framework. Participants are asked to rate their level of agreement with each statement, selecting from a 4-point scale, with 1 representing strongly disagree and 4 representing strongly agree. Here we have a sample of data collected from these surveys. There are 2 horizontal bars next to each statement. The top horizontal bar displays response frequencies for the baseline survey, and the bottom bar displays frequencies for the follow-up survey, with blue tone indicating less agreement. Again, the baseline data was used to inform the curriculum committee and trainers about priority areas in which to focus activities. The follow-up survey is the formative program assessment that shows how the project has done. This self-assessment measures scholars' gains in knowledge and implementation of the program's conceptual framework. The statements are listed in descending order, with the statements with the highest level of reported knowledge gain at the top. This table on the right side of the screen also shows the statement means for the baseline assessment and follow-up assessment, as well as the resulting reported knowledge gain based on those means. In this case, the statement that received the highest gain in agreement was, I know the federal and state requirements for early childhood and Part C programs, with a gain of 1.13. The statement with the lowest reported gain in agreement was, I know the main tenets of implementation science, with a gain of 0.27. So this wraps up our snapshot of what's going on with evaluation. I hope you all found it helpful in understanding all these surveys that you're being asked to complete. Thank you for your time and have a great day.
All right, stop presenting again, and then share again.
I hadn't watched that yet. That was a great video. Really helpful.
I thought so. And I think for me, I think, we always say, like, at the end of the session, like, please fill out the survey. We really do use what you say. We love your comments. We love your feedback. And that, really just kind of highlights, like, we really do. We look at the data. We use that data to help inform, decisions about, what you guys want, what you need, what you liked, what you didn't like. So I appreciate everybody kind of tuning into that. Are there any questions before I pass this over to Jarrod? And you guys can see my screen, right? Yes, okay, good. I had switched, but I was just making sure. All righty, Jarrod, the floor is yours, my friend. And everyone, this is Jarrod. We get to work with Jarrod every day in the office. He is awesome to work with. And I'll let him tell you a little bit more about himself, a little bit of background and information, and then he is going to jump into some information around physical restraint and seclusion.
Hey everyone, good morning. Just want to make sure you hear me okay. If you can, give me a thumbs up. All righty. So, and I was going to say, I see a few familiar faces on the call this morning. I want to let you all know I appreciate that you are undertaking this opportunity to improve yourselves and get your dose certificates, whatever you may be pursuing. We definitely need a higher number and more access to our students around the state for those who are aware of a high quality of implementation as far as special education is concerned. So again, just shout out to each and every one of you all for taking out your time on Saturdays plus classes. And I will let you all know that some of you all are at Morehead State. That's where I got every degree I have, believe it or not, and did that mostly online. So go Eagles. Woohoo. And we'll just go ahead and get started this morning. If I can get my thing to go over here. First of all, again, my name is Jarrod Slone. I am with the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. My fancy title is I'm an exceptional child specialist. I do exactly what I'm supposed to do. I try to do everything I can to help people out with issues. Now, my primary charges are physical restraint and seclusion. Statewide, that's for both regular ed and special education. So I'm one of the folks in the office that kind of goes on both sides of the coin. I also work with significant disproportionality and CCEIS, or Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services, as well as Voluntary Coordinated Early Intervening Services. We love acronyms in education. It's always fun. What that means, most of you are familiar with what physical restraint and seclusion is that significant disproportionality is a discussion for another day. But what that means is we look at placement, identification, and behavior of a subgroup of students, let's say white to non-white, black to non-black, to see if districts are over-identifying, placing improperly, or over-disciplining that subsection of kids as compared to the non-whatever category. So we look at all those racial categories. That's a whole other session that would take a lot longer than what we probably have this morning. So I've also been a principal. I've been an assistant principal. I've been a dean. I've been a teacher. I've been an interventionist. And as I used to say, I was also a chief cook and bottle washer. So I've swept, I've made popcorn, I've done anything and everything there is to know. I've also taught or supervised every single grade but sixth grade. So including pre-K. So if we've got any of our early childhood folks out there, I even have experience there. So what I'm saying is, if you're sitting in a session this morning, I've probably been in or around everything you've done as a school employee. So just to kind of give you all a background on me and what I've done in the past. So The only silly question for today is the one left unasked. And the only silly question, or the only silly thing, is the one left unsaid. So please, if you have comments or questions, put those in the chat. I'm going to try to monitor those. I know Shasta said that she and some others were going to try to help me. I'm sure Becca's going to try to help me keep an eye on that for you all. And I just brought up my chat so I can keep an eye on it while we're talking. So without further ado, let's talk really quickly, though, about the content and what that can mean to you all on the call today. Discussions about physical restraint and seclusion are something that can be stressful and traumatic. So I understand that. We, as the KDEO SEAL, understand that. It is, however, essential to talking about children with disabilities. I didn't include statistics in today's sheet, but I can tell you that on average, that 75% of the state's seclusions and physical restraints are special education students, while 25% or so are regular ed students. So by and large, the most of the students who are physically restrained or secluded are special education students. That's also a discussion for another day in looking at that data. Please keep in mind that if you do have a moment where you are feeling triggered in any way, shape, form, or fashion, take care of yourself. Enact self-care, because we know that these discussions can be difficult to have. We know that you may have a personal experience. You may have a child or know of a child who's had a rough time as a result of this. Also, there's a fact sheet for child serving professionals. Secondary trauma is real. It is, you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves as professionals, and particularly in a time where our students are struggling post-COVID with lack of structure, with lack of what have you. We really understand that it can be a difficult thing for you all as professionals. So just keep in mind and practice self-care. As I say, take time for self-care, resilience, and wellness as we explore today's topic. Now, today's going to be largely steeped in the regulations. I'm going to tell you all that. I'm going to try to engage with you a little bit in terms of what that means and how that looks. But before we begin, I've got a poll that I'm going to launch, and I'm going to ask each of you, and this is going to be anonymous, so don't think that I'm sitting here taking a look at it and I'm going, oh my goodness, this is something that he's keeping the information on, and he knows who's saying what. This is anonymous when it gets submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll for each of you all. That should pop up. So if you would, there's 9 questions. Take just a moment. I feel like I should be playing some music here. Jeopardy or something.
Jarrod, we have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Asking if the link could be added to the chat. Yeah.
The poll should be there in the chat.
See, it's showing up in mine. I can see there's the poll option either directly on my screen or in the chat.
No worries, Miranda. Folks know me. I really want to be playing music right now. I see that we've got 27 responses. I'll see how everybody is on these. Oh, you're doing pretty well so far. I missed the response on number 8. My apologies. Should have been true or false, but that's on me. See, I'm trying to see if everybody's pretty close to being done here, and it looks like y'all are pretty doggone close. All right, so what I have done is I have just downloaded, and then what I want you all to do is we go through here, I'll try to make, to call out and as we get to the questions. And if you want to guess that there might be a post quiz at the end of this, post quiz at the end of this, then we'll take a look at where your responses lie after we're finished with our session. So, all right. So has everyone had an opportunity? If you have not had an opportunity to respond fully, do me a favor, put a thumbs up in your react at the top of the screen. You have not finished. Okay. I believe that is everyone. So with that said, I'm going to close that poll. All righty. So I will tell you all that we did have some mixed results on some of them. So what I do want to look at, and there's not really a way for me to display this, but believe it or not, the number one area where we had kind of a half and half split is on the first question. And that's all school staff are required to be trained in physical restraint and seclusion practices annually. So that seems to be the one where there's the most disagreement. The law enforcement required to be trained by school staff annually. That's the one where there's another piece of disagreement. And the seclusion space. So those are your three main areas. So keep an ear out specifically for those as we go through the session this morning. All right. Oh, Randy, you weren't able to get to that, huh? Let me try turning that back on. Hang on. I'm sorry, I did not see that. Let me try to reopen that poll for you.
Jen Riley had issues accessing it as well.
Okay.
It's probably on the desk. Make sure that you're logged on through your district's Microsoft account if possible.
So I just reopened it. If you all want to close it, I reopened it for Jen and Miranda. So it may have just popped up on your screen there. So you all, those of you who don't need to do it, can just pop it off your screen. All right. So let's just go ahead and start working through this here. So what is the regulation around physical restraint and seclusion? It's lots of lovely light reading. If you know, because all these KARs are, I know you all love to sit around and read Kentucky administrative regulations. It's your favorite pastime, right? Everybody loves that KAR. Yeah, it's fun. And I see Kim nodding at me. I see Nicole nodding at me. Oh yeah, it's so much fun. But believe it or not, we're one of the few states. At last count, there are only 12 states in the United States that have physical restraint and seclusion laws. An interesting piece of information about this reg in particular is that David Wickersham, who was with you all last month, and Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton were key in crafting this legislation back before Greta became a division director and then an associate commissioner. So this actually started with Greta and David and some other folks right at 10 years ago. So that's where the bulk of this and who wrote and actually did a lot of the background and did a lot of the legwork on making sure that this became a reality for the students of Kentucky are within our office. That's the reason it's still here, because it's very near and dear to Greta in particular. So again, back in 2013, 10 years ago, actually this month, we had a brand new law, again, still one of 12. There have been some federal legislation that's been proposed. The last time was about 2.5 years ago. It stayed in committee and never made it out as far as federal legislation. So again, very important to know that we are one of the few states that actually has laws that cover how and when and why it's done. So what are local districts required to do? Local districts and policies and procedures have to have these in them. And if you all have never gone and looked at your board procedures, most folks just adopt the KSBA model ones. That's pretty standard. So a lot of times, as you all know, they'll take something that's required to be promulgated, and then they'll just take it once the Kentucky Board of Education gets their piece of it. Then KSBA used to write a lot of policies. I don't think they do that quite as much anymore, but most district policies are the KSBA policies. There are some districts that have specific, more in-depth policies. I know JCPS has a more in-depth policy than some of the other districts. It's not just the KSBA, but some districts have gone a little step further with some of these regs. They have to ensure how that school personnel are aware of and parents are notified how to access policies and procedures. They have to be designed to ensure the safety of all students. And they require school personnel to be trained in accordance with the requirements outlined in Section 6 of the reg. We're going to talk about what's in Section 6 here in just a few minutes. So again, you all know when it comes to a law, if it says shall, that means do not pass go, do not collect $200. That means you have to do it. Not a may, might, or if it says must or shall, then it's something that absolutely positively has to be done. So here's what your procedures have to outline. It has to outline how, after a physical restraint or seclusion, the notice to parents are given, the documentation of the event in the student information system. That's IC for us in Kentucky. Believe it or not, I know a lot of y'all may not know this. IC is the vendor for Kentucky. It's actually called the Kentucky Student Information System, or CASIS. It's just that, and for those of y'all who've been around as long as I have, it used to be STI back in the day. Then we switched to IC, but they are the vendor. That's actually not the information system. It's what we use for the information system. So whatever that is, we're required to document, have certain documentation in there for physical restraint seclusion. We're going to talk about what that documentation is here in a few minutes. There also has to be a process, you'll see this question should look familiar, for the parent or emancipated youth to request a debriefing session. Notice it says to request a debriefing session. So what does that mean? Is it required to give the parent or the emancipated youth the debriefing session? Only if they request it. There's a notification requirement that's different, but the debriefing session itself is only required if the parent or the child's of age and requests it. The parent or guardian is really what that should say, but the reg doesn't say guardian. That's another conversation. So this is the toughest part of the reg, and I'm going to say this to you all. Believe it or not, we have had to receive some of these reports through the years. They're not a lot, but if something happens that's, for lack of a better term, catastrophic, if as a result of a physical restraint or seclusion, a child were to pass away, there's substantial risk of death, extreme physical pain, protracted or obvious disfigurement or protracted loss of impairment or the function of a bodily member or organ, or impairment of mental faculty resulting from the use of physical restraint or seclusion. Folks, it's few and far between, but it has happened in this state. So that is the reason We're going to talk about the training for your core team here in a few minutes. That is why it is so vitally important that only those who are trained physically restrain a student, because the events that have happened in the past might have some questionable training that went along with them. I'm not going to go into that, but it is required that that be reported to the KDE. There's a form that's linked on the Physical Restraint and Seclusion website. You go in, you fill that out, and it comes to me very quickly. And then I'll follow up pretty much immediately to see what's going on with that situation. Has happened. You all may have seen it on the news through the years, but it has happened. So the policies have to also outline a procedure by which this parent may submit a complaint regarding the physical restraint or seclusion of their child. This is to the local district, is what this is speaking to. The district and school to investigate the circumstances surrounding the physical restraint or seclusion, make written finding, and if appropriate, take corrective action. You all know if you don't document it, it didn't happen. You've got to document every single step along the way that happens, no matter how innocuous it might seem. The more documentation you have, the better off you are. And I know this is nothing new for a lot of the folks on here this morning. Outline a procedure to regularly review data. I'm going to repeat that. Outline a procedure to regularly review data on physical restraint and seclusion usage and revise policies as needed. Are you reviewing the data on a regular basis for physical restraint and seclusions? I will tell you that answer is 50-50, depending upon who you ask. And just make sure, not as I used to say when I was working with MTSS and RTI back in the day, if you're not doing it, nod and smile and do it going forward. But just make sure that you're meeting those requirements. So when shouldn't physical restraint be used? So now we're talking about proper use of physical restraint. As punishment or discipline, to force compliance, or to retaliate. Folks, the worst thing you can do is have an upset person engage in a physical restraint. If that's you or someone else, turn that over to someone else, because the likelihood of that kid getting hurt increases based on your personal level of anticipation or what have you, or anger for that fact. It can't be used as a substitute for appropriate educational or behavioral support. PBIS, you actually have to document what you do prior to the physical restraint or seclusion to de-escalate that situation. I mean, I'm going to tell you all, we've had students who are physically restrained several times. When we go in to look at the records, there's no documentation of what was done to de-escalate that child prior to the physical restraint or the seclusion. That is required by the law that you do that you implement positive behavior solutions. Obviously, if you've got a behavior improvement plan, you have to follow that behavior improvement plan. Whatever that says is what's supposed to be done. It is you can also not use it to prevent property damage. They can tear down that entire daggone room. As long as they're not in danger of harming themselves or others. And I mean clearly in danger of harming themselves or others. It can't be used as a routine safety measure. It can't be your first line of defense. And it can't be used as a convenience for staff. Well, we've got to get them out of here and get them on the bus. We've got to physically restrain them. That's not an appropriate use. Whatever it takes is whatever it takes. If you've got to stand and wait, and like I said, let them tear the room apart, and I can't tell you all how many times I stood in a corner and let a kid do that and just let them get it out. But here's the thing too, you've got to design a room that they can't tear apart easily too. I mean, let's just say things the way they should be. So You shall not, notice it says shall not use mechanical restraint. I'm going to tell you an example on that one. Kid on the bus, everywhere, all over the place. Well, let's just buckle them in and have somebody hold that buckle to make sure that they stay in there. That's not a proper use. Chemical restraint, pepper spray, so on and so forth. That's not by school personnel a proper use. Notice that I said by school personnel. Adversive behavioral interventions, physical restraint that's life-threatening. It has to follow the training that's required of that core team. This is the big one, and I'm going to tell you all. You remember a minute ago, I put a question, and it said which one of these is not an appropriate use of restraint. Aikido is not a proper use of physical restraint. Not by school personnel in the state of Kentucky. It is not. And I see some reactions right now, and that's okay. That's okay. Like I said, now you know. And as G.I. Joe used to say, knowing is half the battle. Prone or supine restraint is clearly outlined or prohibited under Kentucky state law by school personnel. Remember what I said a minute ago. Smile and nod and go on and make sure it's not what's being used. And by you can't necessarily control everything. We know that. But know that this is what the law says.
Jarrod,
Okay?
we have a question in the chat.
I figured I would. Let's see. What's my question here? Oh, can you tell us what that is a few minutes late? Okay. All right, Ashley, that is, again, prone or supine restraint is face down, face up, control. So again, Aikido control is a specific type, and that's when you use joint manipulation, so on, to control a child. That is expressly prohibited. I hope that answered your question, Ashley. So it's okay, like I say, knowing is half the battle, as G.I. Joe used to say. The only time physical restraint or seclusion can be used is when a child poses an imminent danger of physical harm to selves or others. That's the only time. And I'm talking about, and I'm going to say this, to be honest with y'all, as a principal, I can actually, on two hands, count the number of times that I physically restrained a kid. That's it. And that's probably one of the reasons that I'm in this role, is that I truly believe you've got to use every tool in your belt. Sometimes it's necessary. Fully understand that. When it's necessary, do it appropriately. That's all that's required. It cannot, and here's what we're talking about specifically, those students who have, who are deaf, hard of hearing. This is where we've seen this one be questionable. The physical restraint does not interfere with the student's ability to communicate in the student's primary language or mode of communication. So if it's a student that uses ASL, they have to still be able to communicate with the mode of restraint that's used. Again, you wouldn't want to put your hand over the mouth of a kid who doesn't have an impairment, correct? So you wouldn't necessarily bind the kid's arms to where they couldn't communicate with you if needed. Like, I'm hurt, or that's painful, something along those lines. That's the reason that reg reads the way it does. So, or the hands, students' hands for brief periods during the restraint that appears likely to result in the physical harm to self or others. You can briefly do that, okay? But not to the point that they can't communicate with you at any point in that incident. It can only be implemented when the school personnel are properly trained as required by Section 6.3. there's a section that shows exactly what core team training is. Most folks, by the way, it's ultimately the district's responsibility to make sure that you have a core team in each school that's properly trained. Most of you all know that as SCM training. That's a vendor that offers training. The local district may undertake your own training so long as it meets the requirements of the regulation. But here's the thing, if you do that, you are taking on the liability as a district on either properly or improperly training that person or those people on that staff. And if you want to take that on, CPI is another vendor that some folks use. It's typically either SCM or CPI. Those are vendors. But you can, as a district, train your own people. Because here's the thing, we know it is expensive to train, particularly in SCM. But they do design their trainings to meet every piece of the state requirement, the regulation requirement. Notice, though, there is an exception here. So if you are not part and you have not been properly trained, here's when you can, as a non-core team trained person, restrain. To prevent physical harm to self or others in clearly unavoidable emergency circumstances where other school personnel intervene and summon trained school personnel as soon as possible. That means if you have a kid who is harming another kid, and I'm going to say this, I've broken up a fight or two in my time, even when I wasn't SCM trained. But the point is, you can only do that very, very, very sparingly, and immediately someone should be summoned who is trained to come take care of that situation. Okay, so there is an allowance for every teacher, every staff member, if needed, but that should be like a 1-2% of the time if that gets used. Not very, very, very often at all. So it has to end as soon as the student's behavior no longer poses an imminent danger of physical harm to self or others, or the medical condition occurs putting the student at risk of harm. Folks, I had an incident last year where a kid was restrained for 2 hours and 23 minutes. That's not as soon as that kid no longer posed. And I mean, we had 6 people switch out in that incident. So needless to say, I took a look at it. That's all I'm going to say. So let's go on to seclusion now. When should seclusion be used? Again, you'll see these are familiar. It should not be used as punishment or discipline, to force compliance or to retaliate, as a substitute for appropriate educational or behavioral support, or to prevent property damage in the absence of imminent danger of harm to self or others. Are you getting this repeating over and over again? Imminent harm to self or others? That's what.
Jarrod, we have another question. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Let me see what that is, Beck. I'm sorry. You say that the state regulation requires that if the child, Sarah, I'm answering your question. So that it requires that if the child offers imminent harm to themselves or others, then it has to be done for the safety of themselves or for the school. That's a state regulation. Now, that's again that physical reason, but that's how you respond. And if it gets beyond that, you can refer that to me, and I'll be happy to tell them that information. Hope that answered that question. So when can seclusion be used? Oh, look, imminent harm to self or others. The student is visually monitored for the duration of the seclusion. You can't just put them in a room without a window and shut the door. You have to be able to physically monitor them at any time. So again, that can be done through a window. That's not a problem. least restrictive interventions have been ineffective in stopping that imminent harm, and the school personnel have to be properly trained to use the seclusion. Again, it has to end as soon as that child no longer poses danger to self or others. Please don't put them in a room for 3 hours. And yes, I have seen that. So, exactly. So, the medical condition occurs putting the student at risk of harm. Those are the two instances where it has to end. Notice, you have to have a designated room for seclusion if you're going to use seclusion. Every school is not required to have a seclusion room. That's only if you elect to have it. That's only if you elect to have a seclusion room. Not every, so if you all as a district decide you don't want to have a seclusion room, you don't have to. But if a seclusion room exists, it has to be free of objects and fixtures. So it has to be, they can't go tear some things off the wall. You can't put them, by the way, you can't put them in a book room where there's shelves everywhere and they can pull those things down on top of them, or where the basketball team stores all their equipment. Can you tell that I may have seen these things? So it can't be in that. It has to be free of any object. It has to provide school personnel a view of the student at all times. It has to be, has to have lighting and ventilation. It has to be reviewed by district administration. Probably most of you are going to be safe schools folks if you're not already, as the dose, because that's what happens 90% of the time. Be reviewed to ensure that everything is correct and that data are being kept appropriately on its use. Have an unlocked and unobstructed door. Have an unlocked and unobstructed door. I'm repeating that for a reason. And have at least an annual fire and safety inspection. So hopefully you all know that requirement at the beginning of each year. What does every building have to have? Fire marshal has to come through and take a look at all your spaces, make sure they're appropriate. That's when you do it. So, and I had designed this. I hope that my friends don't mind that I'm stopping here for our break, because I'm actually to our break here. I'm looking to see. Let's see, Alan. My staff always questions what their liability is when using, even when they've been properly trained. Many are reluctant, and I understand that, Alan. The fact of the matter is, if they're using, it's like anything else we do. If they're using the training properly, and I mean, I will tell you all this, my liability insurance, I had my liability insurance when I was doing that. But if they're trained properly, then that shouldn't be an issue, because both the district, if the district's putting the onus on SCM or CPI to do the training, then they have the confidence that that person has been properly trained. So as long as they're properly trained and using their training correctly, that shouldn't be that much of a concern, but I could understand where the concern would come from. So what I want you all to do is kind of take just a minute. Shasta, is it okay if we go ahead and do our break here and let folks kind of think about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So what I'd like for you all to think about while you're away and taking your break is, when should physical restraint and seclusion actually properly be used? And if you've ever been in a situation where physical restraint or seclusion was used improperly, how could that situation have been avoided? So I'd like for y'all to just think about that over the break. So Shasta, I'm going to pop it back over to you after these sessions in doing that with folks like me, because I promise you, I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirts. Even though I don't have a nice, cool Kentucky Lead shirt like some of you all do. But I have been there, done that, bought the t-shirts, and I've got a lot of them downstairs from where I was a principal. So just understand that we're here to help. And I know that's hard to hear sometimes, but it is. We are really here to help. I promise you. And I hope Carol Ann's going to shake her head and say, yes, we are here to help. So, so let's talk about notification requirements. So we talked about the what. Now we're going to talk about what has to happen after a physical restraint or seclusion happens. So what has to happen? And if y'all remember, I put a tricky question on you. I said they had to be notified in how many hours? Does anybody remember? I think the poll said 48 instead of 24. I pulled it. Don't you hate when people put those tricky questions in like that? I don't know if any of y'all have taken the principal's exam or superintendent's piece or anything like that, but that's the kind of questions they put on there for you. Within 24 hours after the incident, the parent either you have to make an attempt to, by phone call, get a hold of them through verbally or through electronic communication, if available to the parent, or if the parent can't be reached, then you have to put something in the mail, the snail mail, and let them know. So a lot of folks forget that last piece. So if you can't get a hold of them within 24 hours, either by email or phone call, you have to put something in the mail to notify them. What I used to do is I had a letter, and I would print out, and I did this pretty much anyway. I would mail out a copy of the detail of the incident to them, making sure to limit it to only the information related to their kid. Don't put things in there for the other kid. Make sure that doesn't get done. I know you all know this, but I would mail an actual copy of that behavior detail that I had put into IC. I'd print that out and send it to them. I did that pretty standardly, though, with anything that happened, just because I like to keep the lines of communications open with my parents, and so that they knew exactly what had happened in the school. So again, that debriefing session has to be held only if the parent requests it or the emancipated youth. So it's not required that that parent debriefing session is done unless it is specifically requested after the physical restraint or seclusion. And by the way, this is straight from the rag. So who is required to be trained? All school personnel are required to be trained in physical restraint and seclusion policies and procedures. Notice that doesn't say in the actual restraint, but annually, every single staff member in anywhere in Kentucky schools, that's whether you are a cafeteria worker, a janitor, all school personnel are required annually to be trained in the regs and the policies and procedures in and around physical restraint and seclusion. All school personnel shall be trained. Notice there's an asterisk there, and I'm going, it's probably too small for y'all to see what that asterisk is. Annually, to use an array of positive behavioral interventions and supports and interventions, also known as PBIS. Whether that's, as we used to say, large PBIS or small PBIS, whether that's in the official PBIS or just in practices in and around that. That can be done using web-based applications. If you go on our website, Rachel Jenga over in, I'm sure some of y'all have probably met or know of Rachel. She's the one who handles PBIS. That's in another office from ours. But there are videos out there, and y'all have done those videos, I'm sure, lots of times and watched those videos at the beginning of every year. But notice that says all school personnel. That's janitors, that's people in your central office. I say that because my wife is a payroll person and had to do this in a local district to increase appropriate student behaviors, decrease inappropriate or dangerous behaviors, and respond to dangerous behaviors. So everyone, no matter what the role is in a school district, is required to be trained in that. What's required in the training? Appropriate procedures for preventing the need for physical restraint and seclusion, including PBIS, state administrative regulations and school district policies and procedures regarding physical restraint and seclusion. So you remember how I talked about those KSBA policies that a lot of you all have adopted? or if you're in JCPS or another district that's done further, that's required to be trained as well. So these are the things that have to be included in that training. Proper use of positive enforcement, the continuum of use for alternative behavioral interventions, and crisis intervention. So what I'm saying to you, if you'll notice, if your policy goes above and beyond what's in those KSBA regulations, you have to train on that separately. So you might want to check your policies to make sure that there's nothing more specific in your local policies that have to be trained. So that's a piece that some people miss from time to time. So you can use the online trainings, but if you've got something extra in your local policy, that has to be trained as well. De-escalation strategies for responding to inappropriate, dangerous behavior, including verbal de-escalation, relationship building, and proper use of seclusion, as talked about in the reg. So, who is on the core trick team and what's required of that core team? And Alan was talking about some of his folks being real hesitant to be trained because of the possible liability in and around it. Fully understand that. I will tell you all that I have a pretty severe neck issue that I couldn't physically restrain now if I had to. So you've got a lot of folks who either won't or can't, but it is a requirement under the reg that you do. Each school has a trained core team. So that core team has to receive annual yearly training. Notice, except school resource officers and other sworn law enforcement officers. Their training is different than our training as school personnel. It is, and they actually have particularly if they're an SRO, they have an entire specific training that they have to go through that talks about how to properly restrain a student if they have to. But that's under a different reg outside of our regs as school personnel. So the core team shall receive annual training in these areas. Appropriate procedures for preventing physical restraint, a description and identification of dangerous behaviors that may indicate the need for physical restraint, and methods for evaluating the risk. So not only should they be trained through as a core team on what to do, but also when is a kid escalating and how do we de-escalate them? Because that's the key. That's really the prevention is the key when we're talking about physical restraint, and whether physical restraint is safe and warranted. That you'll notice we keep coming back to, it should be very, very sparingly used unless you absolutely positively have to use it. They also have to receive, and this was suspended temporarily during COVID, simulated experience of administering and receiving physical restraint and instruction regarding the effect on the person physically restrained, including instruction on monitoring physical signs of distress and obtaining medical assistance. If you've not been a part of that training, you actually have to go in, and we did this with pool noodles post-COVID for a little bit. People had made these little pretend guys made of pool noodles, or another person in the class, now that we're post-COVID, because that's the way we did it before, and practice that you are doing these holds properly, and someone signs off on, a certified trainer signs off on if those are being enacted properly. Make sure if you have, and again, every school is required to have a core team. If you're not using it that often, that they're brushing up on it ever so often, because what you don't want to get is a person in a situation where they're going to have to use what they've been trained and they go, oh my God, I can't remember how to do it. Because I personally have seen that happen with someone I worked with, and the child got hurt because they couldn't remember how to do it. So make sure that they brush up on it. And I will tell you, I actually had a reminder on my calendar that once a quarter I went back in and reviewed it just to make sure that I knew exactly what and how to do if that happened. That's good. And again, that's not required, but that's good practice to make sure that you're doing it properly if you have to use it. So they also have to be trained on how to document that. And there are some pieces in there that are required in the documentation, including the duration of the hold, the type of the hold. Again, as we said earlier, the preventative pieces that went before the hold. And again, that's that demonstration of proficiency in the prevention and use of physical restraint. So that documentation has to be in there on what, when, how, why, who, where, and to what extent. So the more you document, the better off you are. And folks, I'm going to tell you, as prospective doses or current doses or whatever your role is, if you're a principal, whatever, the last thing you want to have to do is find yourself in a debriefing session with a parent. And that person is sitting across the table from you, and you've got the person over here. Y'all can tell I may have done this. Person over here who's physically restrained, and you say, you have to look at them and realize there's something missing in that documentation when that parent asks a question. So make sure before you get in that situation that you've reviewed their documentation and they can answer any and all questions about that moment. I was called in on one that at a school where I was not the admin, and literally was called in because the person was sick and had to sit in on a parent meeting. And it was not the most pleasant experience I've ever had to have to sit across from that parent like that. So the documentation has to be documented by a written record of each and every use. So let's say I've got a kid engaged with a hold. I disengage with that kid. 5 minutes later, they escalate again. That is a separate piece of documentation. And Kane, I'm glad to see you nod your head yes when I said that. It makes me happy. A lot of folks want to just literally put it all under the same behavior incident. Those are separate documentations, separate hold documentations. Each time that child is re-engaged, that has to be documented separately. That's only if you have released them, stepped back, and re-engaged. So understand that. If you're having to switch holds within it, you just document that all in the same piece. But if you've really let them go and 30 minutes later, I mean, we've seen pieces where people have just put 5 different incidents that happen within 3 hours in one behavior resolution. Make sure that you're documenting those separately. So each record has to be informed by an interview with the student. And shall include the student's name, a description of the use of the physical restraint or seclusion and the student behavior, the date of that, the beginning and ending times of the physical restraint and seclusion, a description of any events leading up to the use of physical restraint or seclusion, including the possible factors contributing to the dangerous behavior. Again, folks, documentation is key. A description of the student's behavior during physical restraint or seclusion. That's why if you've been through SEM training or CPI, they talk about having somebody standing over and writing down details. Having a scribe there, someone that can document what's going on. That's not always available. I understand that. But if you don't have somebody standing there doing that, if you've got witnesses around, make sure after the fact that you're debriefing those folks to say, okay, can you remember what happened during this time? And a description of techniques or the holds used in physically restraining or secluding the student, and interactions between the student and school personnel. So what has to happen here also is a description of behavioral interventions, a description of any injuries, school personnel, or others. Folks, if they have to have medical attention, make sure you click that box. Make sure you click that box. And if there's any question of whether they should see a school nurse or be seen by medical personnel, cover your hind end. That's all I'm going to say. Make sure that they receive that medical attention if there's any possibility that that child's hurt. Make sure that, or if there's a mark on them, whatever it might be, make sure that that gets done. A description as to how the student's behavior posed an imminent danger of physical harm to self or others. The date the parent was notified, whether, remember, by phone, by email, or by U.S. mail. The effectiveness of the de-escalation. A description of how the school personnel responded. And this is the one people miss. A description of the planned positive behavioral interventions in the future to keep this from happening again. That's the one that most people miss. Is they forget to say, okay, Joey did this. How are we going to use positive behavior interventions, PBIS, what have you, to make sure? Are we going to put a BIP? Are we going to, what's going to happen with this kid to keep this from happening again? Because the whole point is not for it to happen again. So again, you all have noticed PBIS is key to all this. And what I do, and this was in your pre-reading for today, I'm going to bring this up just so that you all can see. I'm going to blow this up for you. Back in 2016, there was a letter. I'm going to look for my specific area here. There was a letter on the inclusion of behavioral supports that should be enacted when you have a physical restraint or seclusion. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put this over in the chat if you all would like to look at this yourself. I'm also going to share with you all a copy of this presentation here in just a moment. So this is a copy of that letter that that you all, and again, I think I put this in that the other day in the pre-reading for you all in the board on the board. There's a Dear Colleague letter specifically from 2016 that speaks on how to keep physical restraint and seclusion from occurring and how to enact positive behavioral supports to students with disabilities. There's also the KDE PBIS page. I'm going to copy that. And again, I'm going to give you all a copy. Well, watch my link not work here. Well, that didn't work right. But the KDE PBIS page, I'll put that in there in a moment. Alternatives to suspensions as well as behavior intervention plans. It's important that we work to prohibit that. This is something that I hope that each of you all have seen. Back in July, OSEP, Office of Special Education Policy, released a Dear Colleague letter on the implementation of IDEA discipline provisions. And let me copy that. And again, this is in that pre-reading that I shared with you all too, but I'm just sharing it again so that you can see it. But within that, there's a question specifically, and there's a link to another document. I'm going to take you all to this one specifically as soon as I can get it to come up here. It is in question B3. I'm sorry, I thought I had this up and ready. You all can look away for just a minute while I scroll down and find this for you. B2, B3. So I'm going to blow this up so that my dog can see, not because I'm blind these days and can't see anything. Shannon, I see Shannon's grin because she knows I say that all the time. So does OSEP consider restraint or seclusion to be an appropriate strategies for disciplining a child for behavior related to their disability? What's that first thing say? No. Only if it's absolutely necessary. So again, they're saying that as a behavior modification piece, physical restraint should not be used. It should only be used to protect the child in imminent harm to self or others. So it actually speaks in this recent guidance on that. There's also within there, documentation that leads to some other resources on physical restraint and seclusion. I have all of these up on my KDE webpage, on our KDE OCL webpage, links to all these. But I did want to make sure that you all saw that the first thing that OSEP says is, no, this is not an appropriate behavioral intervention. It should only be used in harm to self or others. And you notice it says that very, very specifically right there, right in the middle of that paragraph. All righty. So there's other resources here, including the reg. There's discipline procedures. There's items on, let's see, Savannah, the alternatives to suspension. Again, that's in training that you all can receive. It doesn't necessarily list those alternatives to suspension, Savannah, but it does. There are several resources out there on receiving training for alternatives to suspension. It's not specifically in this presentation. If you want to know exactly how things have to be documented in IC, there's this data standard for behavior that talks to you exactly on how you need to document that. And Becca, I just realized I cannot upload the presentation to the chat. So
if you'll share it with me, I'll put it in the Kentucky Lead site. Everybody will have access that way.
I can do that. I can do that. So
thank you.
With that said, questions, comments, concerns?
I'll just share really quickly, Jarrod. I work with Kentucky PNA and some other advisory groups. And I know that Lucy Heskins recently shared that they're working on that whole like debriefing piece, how a lot of families aren't aware that they have to request it.
Yes.
And so they're working on making sure that families are aware of that, you know, after a physical restraint or seclusion, after they've been made aware of it, that they need to request that debriefing, and just kind of giving some pointers on how to have those conversations and, you know, support strong family school partnerships within that. And so as that comes out, you guys be checking out PNA, be watching for PNA to see when that comes out. But it again, just something that they are working on, and making sure that families are aware that it is that they need to request that if the district doesn't make that clear.
Sure. And I think somebody just asked a question. Give me just a second. I'm uploading this for Becca, and I will pop back over and see what that is. Becca, you should have that in your Teams chat right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Martha, that does follow. The restorative practice is a vital piece of this, because that's the thing, particularly once a student is restrained or physically restrained or secluded, really working on that restorative piece in terms of that relationship with the kid. And also before, it's a good preventative strategy in making sure that you've got that connectiveness, that if a kid gets escalated, that you can call in someone who has that personal connection with that kid. I think that's key as well.
Jarrod, there are lots of people that are sharing comments.
Yeah.
If you all want to go, if you're welcome to continue to use the chat, but you're also welcome to unmute yourselves and speak directly to the group, whatever you'd like.
Nicole, to answer your question too in the chat, there is not any specific guidance about the student interview piece. There's the regulation that outlines what's required during that, and that's obviously what I've shared with you all today. Other questions, comments, or concerns? Martha, it really is difficult. I want to make sure everybody can see the chat. She's talking about the suspensions with drugs and working on ways to improve the process. I will say this, and Shannon, I apologize ahead of time. Shannon's doing some really good work in Fayette County right now that I had the pleasure of getting to talk with her about yesterday, particularly around restorative practice, equity-based practices, and some things like that. Shannon Deep, who's in your all's group, she's one of my partner districts, so she's doing some really good work. She and her team are doing some really good work there on that. All right. Shasta, Becca, if all hearts and minds are clear, we're ready to move on to the next phase.
Awesome. Thank you.
Alrighty, friends, here, let me grab the screen here. So we'll go ahead and be ready to kind of move into our small group discussions and an opportunity for you guys just to, again, chat with your peers and then kind of bring back any, highlights or questions to share with Jarrod after we're done. There we go. So really quickly, go ahead and grab your general discussion questions. Of course, I know that this topic is likely to generate some questions and some thoughts all on its own. But here are some general thinking questions. So go ahead and grab a screenshot of those so that you can share those in your group. And then just while you're in your group, just kind of be thinking about picking one person to kind of share out at the end.
And I
And
will share with, go ahead.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Becca. I was just going to
Oh.
share with everyone that I'm going to be hopping back and forth between the rooms. So if y'all have questions or whatever, I'm going to be listening in on y'all if you don't mind. So.
Yeah. And I did kind of shrink the groups a bit this week. You'll be in groups of 5 or 6. Shasta, I'm going to open the groups now. What time will we come back?
It's 11:30 now, so we're doing really good on time. Jarrod was really great in giving us a very concise presentation. So if we could just be back by like 11:45, we should be good.
Okay, I'm going to open those rooms now. Jarrod's going to be hopping around. And I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. I see a couple participants who Miranda ain't, oh, nope. Yep, it's just Miranda now. Miranda, are you able to unmute your microphone?
Showing me that she's on hold.
Oh, okay, then she may be, maybe. Oh, I have a question mark next to her with an exclamation point from SharePoint, so it's on my end. Just as a reminder to this group, I know it's just our leadership group, but our recording will continue on through this 15 minutes, and I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, Kim, did it kick you back?
It kicked me out, and then I got back in, and then I had nothing on my screen. I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't unmute myself, so I got back out again, and I'm trying to get back to I think I was in room 4.
Okay, let me see here. Becca stepped away for a second, but let me.
Yeah, it's.
I'm so afraid I'm going to hit something and like everybody's going to be kicked out, and I'm so nervous about hitting anything. This is Becca's area of expertise, but let me play around here for a minute.
Yeah, that was really weird. Like I could hear them talking, but I couldn't. I don't know if they could hear me. I couldn't see them. I've never had an issue before. I don't know what's going on.
And looks like the only way it's going to let me add you is if I take over the rooms, and I don't know what will happen if I take over the rooms from Becca. So I'm like, I don't want to do
Oh,
that.
I'm here. Let me,
Okay.
Kim, let me try and add you.
Yeah, it shut down and then I got back in and then I went to the room and then I couldn't see or talk or hear or anything. I mean, I could hear, but they couldn't hear me.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
that's-
you're already in that room, so you should have an option to rejoin. Let me see.
Again, I was there and then I had to get out. So, because I couldn't, it wasn't loading anything.
Oh, what room were you in?
I was in 4, I believe.
Okay, let me try again. You should go there hopefully shortly because I just
Okay.
added you back.
Thank you.
If you see an option to rejoin, if that pops up, you'll want to click on that. What I see now, the only participant who is unassigned is Mike Abel. So everyone else is successfully in the room.
Nice. Thank you, Becca.
You're welcome.
I was trying to get Kim back in, and it was like, if you do this, it's gonna I don't know. Basically, it was gonna take the rights away from you and give them to me or something. And I was like,
Well,
nope.
in the future, it's okay to do that because I have all of my changes saved. So all that we'll do is give you the ability to move her to a room. So it's not, it won't like close the rooms or anything. So you can do that.
That's
I
what
had
was
to take
afraid
it
of.
from someone. We had some people that I guess when participants log on with guest accounts, maybe, I don't know, but even though we reuse this link, sometimes when we begin our meeting again, it pops them out of their assigned rooms from our last session and I have to add them. And so I just had that same error. It's not an error message, but that same message pop up. So I quickly had to Google it. Beginning of our meeting, like, what is going to happen? What is this message? And it was good.
Becca, how many rooms are there today?
9.
9 rooms. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I decreased the number of participants just because it seems like an intimate topic. I didn't know if people would feel better sharing. It's just not touchy. It's just, I'm sure this conversation provides or can bring lots of feelings about.
It's a challenging topic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jarrod's
Oh,
done really
yeah.
well today.
Mhm.
Everyone, really
Yeah,
well. It's
I
been a
mean-
really good interaction.
A massively important one and one fraught with litigation. This is the stuff they never talk about in the coursework.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some comments in the chat to that effect, or that it's like, this is more useful. What Alan's point, right? So much more useful and practical than what they're getting in higher ed.
I was just thinking, from the perspective of a teacher, times when I taught first grade, when I should have had this information then. Of course, that was in 2005. But I wish I had had this information then. It would have been helpful and provided, it's just, I wonder when this topic first came about. Do you remember when Jarrod said it first came about?
2013 is when the law passed, but it was in
That's-
response to terrible things happening before that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I'll say too, I was SCM trained, and I remember one of the things that our team trainer did. It's not necessarily the SCM trainer, like the vendor, like he said, but our trainer. I think the training was supposed to be 2 days or 3 days, but our core team leader had an additional day added to it where it was solely focused on de-escalation. And so the message to us was, it was, 2/3 of that training was on de-escalation, and
Mhm.
only a third of it was on, restraints, which again, that part is important, but I think that de-escalation part is essential and so oftentimes so overlooked. Um, and I just think about, working with families and hearing from families and, hearing from P&A and things. And it's like you said, there's two sides to this. There's two perspectives to this, where there's always a child, like a human child at the end of it. And then, Lucy also shared they have these voices of something. I can't remember their publication that they have where it's children who are now adults sort of reflecting on and sharing their experience of being a child who was restrained, and how traumatic it was for them. And I think sometimes maybe we forget that it should always
Mhm.
be the absolute positive last resort, and only when that imminent, being all caps, right, danger, otherwise we de-escalate and we provide PBIS and we provide supports and mental health supports and emotional supports and good UDL. I mean, all of those things have to
Yeah.
happen.
This
Yeah,
like
that's a
other
really good point.
things,
Oh, go
this
ahead,
like
Mike.
I'm just saying this like other things within a school when things break down. You can't solve these issues of, say, physical management or say crisis management without systemically looking at your school and the services that are offered in your school. And what often happens when a school doesn't look at this, it's because the leader's not identifying this as important. And then you start to have a culture that doesn't value this or see it as a critically important area to mitigate risk for the district, for the school, for the child, for the family. And thus that it's like a culture, I don't say a culture of non-compliance, but a culture of poor quality. So what happens when you have poor quality in something? In a vehicle, it breaks down more often. It can be dangerous when you really need it in times of trouble, bad weather, etc. And so with safe crisis management, that is a tool to allow you to increase the quality of your school and your programs within your school. But I know a lot of principals just don't see the value in that. But times have changed, even since 2013. I know, say, crisis management, schools were getting trained in that before the reg came through and it was passed in the law. But things have changed a lot since 2013. I mean, we have guns coming into school every
Mhm.
day in urban areas here in the state. And so it's almost like, to me, safe crisis management, discussion, training, reflection is something that should be done just like when you're standing out in front of your school every day, greeting the kids when they're coming off the bus, just taking the temperature. Safe crisis management is an everyday kind of concern. So just my 2 cents.
That's really well said, Mike. I included a resource from the Trauma Informed Care Plan requirements, Safe Schools and Resiliency Act, right? Senate Bill 1. It's related. It's the role of a leader to establish, a safe culture in the building. And I liked your analogy of, of a quality vehicle.
And I wish we didn't have to deal with these things, but life changes. Things have changed a lot the last 10 to 20 years with this.
Probably everyone with their mics on. Hey, Jen. Hi, friends.
Oh,
Just a reminder as you filter back in that your mics are probably on, which is fine. I just want you to be aware of that.
And really quickly, Jen Riley, I miss your face. That's all.
I know, it's so nice to see her.
Me too.
Aw, miss you guys.
I'm not mad at Jen Riley at all.
No. Okay, it looks like we're all back. I'll let Bill and or Jarrod take it from here.
Thanks, Becca, and just welcome back, everyone. And this is just a chance to share with the whole group reflections, thoughts, ideas, anything surprising, things that you've learned. both from Jarrod's presentation as well as your conversations in small groups. I understand there are about 9 groups, so if anyone would like to share, please feel free to reflect upon, your discussions in small group.
So I'll share out. I really appreciated the conversation that I had with my small group, and though we may have gone off a little bit of a bunny trail with our conversation, what I learned from my colleagues was just invaluable to me. They shared with me some of the systems that they use for communication, which was really helpful because I feel like sometimes we abuse the walkie-talkie system and maybe say things that shouldn't be said that could maybe better be said using some kind of a code, whether it's a colored system or a tiered numbered system that communicates, because we have to remember there are these radios everywhere and students are hearing what's on the radio, parents are hearing what's on the radio in the front office. So cleaning up that can take a situation that's already kind of escalated and bring it down, because as soon as the kids hear some of the things on the radio, then it escalates other students and then it becomes the talk of the town, and then you've just really not protected the integrity of your students.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, communication codes, that can be very helpful for, and really important from a leadership standpoint, thinking through how to effectively communicate. Very good. Others?
One thing that that our
I think someone's trying to share. We're having difficulty hearing. There we are.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, there's Katie. Yeah.
Okay, sorry guys, I'm in the car, right? One thing that we talked about was just the difference in behaviors, the extreme behaviors that we're seeing district-wide and statewide, and I've even talked to people from outside the state with students. So while the restraint and seclusion was used far less frequently previously, we're seeing it a lot more now.
Yeah, good observation. I think this is true statewide, right? We're seeing an increase in the number of extreme and challenging behaviors in classrooms. And so I think, it's making today's topic timely and helpful.
This is Marty Escalante. One of the things that our group talked about is that we haven't necessarily seen an increase in restraint and seclusion. But one of the things that we identified that we would like to get more information on or have a discussion on is dealing with those extreme behaviors, not necessarily through restraint or seclusion, but what would some restorative practices be? What do you do when you reach 10 days and it is a manifestation of the disability? What do you do when it's a student is suspended over and over for drugs? What are some different options? And we were just getting into, like, we kind of veered off from restraint and seclusion, and I was trying to look up what the IAES was, the interim alternative educational setting. And like, I know that term, but I don't know when you can use it, like when it would be appropriate and how that happens. And so I think this conversation today about the restraint and seclusion has really led us into thinking more about what can we do as far as restorative practices, and what are other alternatives to suspension.
Thank you, Martha. Very good points about the importance of restorative practices, and that, as well as the importance of physical restraint and seclusion. It should be last resort. Jarrod, I know, could certainly speak to this. It's like, and yet it's essential to know what, how it works. What are the right? What does the law say? What are the requirements of training? It should be last resort. And absolutely, what are some other things to do that are appropriate? that are preventative. Sounds like you all had a very good discussion.
I'll just say too, I know several of you, you're in different districts and regions across the state and you're seeing some success with different things. So anything that you have that you feel like is working in these preventative measures and these, support measures, any of these things, please share this with your team. Put that either in this chat or put it over in our discussion board, because I think, like you just said, Marty, it's one of those things we're always looking for resources to help support, our students and our teachers. And so if you guys have something that is working or something that you even think, gosh, this looks kind of good, maybe this might be neat for a team to explore, please share that, because oftentimes you guys hear about things well before we do. So please just make sure again that you put that somewhere, and continue these conversations and discussion on the discussion board. And again, if you have any feedback, just in terms of this session, like it would have been great if we had talked a little bit more about this. I know Jarrod and the team would definitely appreciate that. Or if there's places where you're like, yes, this was great. Now can we go deeper in this area, right? Then please just let us know when you do your survey. Let kind of, give us that information, what you really liked, and then also where you would like to know more. It's really helpful to us. Any other final thoughts or questions? Lots of great things coming up in the chat.
Yeah.
This would be a good time to remind everyone to please use the Reflect and Respond discussion board to continue this conversation. As stated earlier, it is used to evaluate participation in Kentucky Leads for data purposes. So if you have, if you would like to use that to continue the conversation, that would be great.
I'd just like to ask too, as we're getting ready to wrap up, Sandy Switters, if you could hang on for just a minute after everybody drops off, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other groups that want to share? Okay. Very good. Well, Shasta, I'll
Alrighty,
turn it back
friends.
over to you. Yeah, thanks.
Alrighty, I will make sure that one of us will make sure that the evaluation wrap up is in the chat. So if one of my team members could make sure that that is in there, don't forget to do that. And as you guys saw at the beginning, we really do use this data. It's very informative to us. And just be mindful of what a 1 represents and what a 4 represents. If you feel like a 1, then put a 1. If it wasn't great, then do that. But if it was great, please just make sure you click the right thing. And then if there's no other questions.
I will take this time again to point out one more thing. There is a technical assistance video that is available in our Kentucky Lead site, as well as the link to the survey, just so you all know. That's always available in on our Kentucky Leads homepage. The link doesn't change. Rebecca Banner gets the data and then clears it, and the same link is used for the next month or the next seminar, so which is March 25th. The link to that session, again, is already available. It's in Kentucky Leads site too. So if anyone is having issues with access, reach out to me, let me know, and I can help you troubleshoot that.
Oh, and I just saw a question. If you're not sure which cohort you're in, that's really good. Martha, I'm pretty sure if you go to the directory, is it correct, Becca, that it's in the directory? It tells you which cohort you are.
It is in the directory, yes.
Okay, so just go visit our directory and it'll tell you which cohort you are in. That's a great question. Our next session is March 25th, so we will see you guys on March 25th. Jarrod, thank you so much for sharing your brain and your morning with us. And if there's nothing else, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.